Hey guys, today I want to show you how to make a deep water culture hydroponic setup like this. My plants are doing really well, and even though I consider myself to be very much a beginner, I feel like these are doing well enough that I'm confident giving you advice for starting up. So first of all, I just want to show you kind of what I have in here. I have 4 basils, there, and over here. And then right down here we have a little oregano. They take a little bit longer to get up to size, but it's still doing really well. And I got 1 cilantro over here. So this is completely set up and working. We also have my seedlings here that I'm starting for a new bucket. And I have some tomatoes and peppers in here that are ready to be transplanted into our system. And the way you know that is that we have roots sticking out of the sides. So these really are wanting to get out of here and go in their new home. Also, they have good, strong, real leaves. So these are ready to be transplanted. I might give you a little bit on how I start these though. When I start the seeds, I buy what is called Rockwool, which is basically rock that's been crushed and spun into these little foam-like cubes. And they're a great medium for planting in because they are an inorganic material, so you aren't going to have fungus growing, although it does have algae on it, but the algae doesn't really hurt anything. It's more like the funguses and the insects, things like that, that are going to hurt your plants. So Rockwool is really good for that. They come in these sheets. They're all kind of connected together, and I just cut them apart, and I put about 3 seeds in each little hole and just kind of scrape some of the fibers over it so they're just barely covered. And then I pour in some nutrient-rich water. They don't really need nutrients at first until they start developing their first set of leaves, but I just do it ahead of time to get them started. So I'll talk about nutrient ratios for different stages later, but just know that this water here has a weak solution of nutrient in it, and this Rockwool kind of soaks up the water from the bottom. I was afraid at first that it would drown them, but honestly they're loving it, so the extra water isn't a problem. And I cover them up with this humidity dome and put them under a grow light once they start sprouting. And so, like I said, once they start developing roots coming out of the bottom of the Rockwool, then that's when you know they're ready to transplant. So let's get into the actual system. I have a bucket over here. It's the same kind as the one over here I'm going to be using. And so let me get this out here and show you more. So this is the tote we will be using. I'm going over a few things you will want to look for in a tote when you buy one for hydroponics. There's not really a whole lot to it. You can probably find a tote that you can use from Walmart or any big box store. That's where I got this one. But there are some important features about a tote you'll want to look for. One is that your tote is opaque. You don't want it to be transparent, because if light gets into your tote, you will probably eventually have problems with algae growing. And while algae doesn't really hurt your plants too much, it can be an annoyance or just clog things up, and it's just something you want to avoid. So you want to go for a completely solid colored or opaque container, including the lid, which brings me to the lid. I looked for a tote that had a lid that didn't have a whole lot of variation and like weird like height textures. This one still has some, but you notice you have like these 3 sections that are fairly flat, which will help my net pots to fit down in them snugly, and I won't have to worry about them fitting over lumps and bumps. So it's good to search for one like that too. The size, I think you can probably get away with basically many different sizes. It really just depends on what you're planning on growing in it. If you need to spread things up because they get bigger, like for example, I'm going to be putting peppers and tomatoes in this one, which means I'm not going to be putting any more than 6 holes in this thing, so they have plenty of room to grow. This one happens to be a 19-gallon tote, so something in that range would be good for about what I'm doing. The other thing that I didn't even realize until I bought it was that there's this natural indentation here, this line, that actually ended up being perfect for the level of water, because when my net pots come down in here, they come to just maybe a couple centimeters right under that line, which is right where you want your net pots to fall. So that's very helpful for me, so that means I don't really have to use any special container to fill this up. I can just fill it up directly with a hose. So that ended up being really nice. So I will show you what we do next. So what we're going to be doing next is drilling our holes for our net pots. And what I'm using is a drill with a 3-inch hole saw on it. And these are 3-inch net pots, so it'll be drilling the perfect size hole for these. The lip on these net pots are just slightly bigger, so they won't go all the way through. They'll just sit in there. So they make many different sizes of net pots. I'm using 3-inch, but whatever size you decide to use, you should make sure you are matching the hole saw size to it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so I stopped my video so I could actually drill these holes. I was having trouble with it. One piece of advice I would have is that when you start drilling, use the forward function on your drill just until the center bit goes through, and then put it in reverse for the actual hole saw part, or else it will probably loosen this bit and it won't work. So just drill it that way. It'll be a lot easier. So yeah, now our net pots fit down in there perfectly. And there's one more hole we need to drill, and for that I'm just going to use a regular drill bit. The size, it doesn't have to be exact, but it's going to be big enough so that we can fit a piece of airline through, but not anymore because we want very minimal light leaking through. And I'm going to do that about centered right here in this panel. I think last time I did this, it needed to be a little bit bigger to fit it through, so I am going to go ahead and try to wiggle that around to make it a little bigger. Alright, so we have our airline hole drilled, and all that is left to do then is just to go take this and wash it out so none of this little plastic debris is in there. We don't want that floating around in our water. So I'll do that and be back. Our next step is to put our tote where it's permanently going to go, because once this thing is filled up with water, it's really heavy, and I really don't want to have to move it again, which is also why we're using a garden hose running to a spigot outdoors, so that I don't have to fill this up in a tub or somewhere else and bring it here. So a couple different things. The quality of water that you put in here, I am still a little unclear on. If someone wants to clear this up in the comments, I would appreciate it. But I haven't really found any clear-cut information on whether it's better to use just straight up well water or if it's better to use softened water. I've heard that softened water isn't that great for plants, so I have decided to just use well water, but I really don't know which is better. I've been having success with well water, so that's probably what I'm going to keep doing. Also, as to the level of water we're going to fill up, like I mentioned before, I'm going to fill it up to this line here. Now, whatever tote you get may not have such a convenient line, so in that case, you're going to have to measure your water and then make a notation, maybe possibly make a mark on the inside of your tote so you know where to fill it up in the future. But usually what I do is I fill it up close to where I think it'll need to be. And then I put the lid on like so, and I take a net pot. Of course, I would put the lid on properly, not just like this, but I'd put a net pot in. And I know in here it's hard to see, but I would look through this hole and look through to where the net pot is coming down to and fill it so that the net pot is just about 1 or 2 centimeters down into the water. And as far as measuring goes, the first time I did it, I just used a milk jug and I marked exactly where a gallon is on it, and I just filled it up. It took forever, but at least I knew that in my case it took exactly 15 gallons of water to get it to the level where it needed to be. And then that number will help you to know how much nutrients to mix in later. So I'm gonna go ahead and fill up my tub, and I will see you in a minute. All right, so we have our water filled up in our tote, and the next thing we are addressing is the temperature of the water. Ideal hydroponic temperatures are from 65 to 80 degrees, and straight out of the tap it's a little bit on the cold side, so we are bringing the temperature up. We are using a sous vide to bring the water temperature up. However, I know probably most people won't own one, so there's different options you could use, such as an aquarium heater, or you could use what I did my first time trying this was to boil a big stock pot of water and then to lower the pot full of water down into the tote until the temperature raised. It was a big pain in the butt though, so I am glad I'm using the sous vide now. I'm using this to measure my temperatures. This is a pH meter, but it also is a thermometer, so I can just test the water by sticking this down in. Also, what I'm doing is I have my air stone down in here soaking so that it'll bubble more efficiently. It's not on right now or anything. Right now it's just soaking, but by the time the temperature is all the way up, it should be good to go. So we're just waiting on that to come up. Okay, our water is up to temp. Just want to show you really quick. Turning my meter on, and then I'm clicking the temp to Fahrenheit. And if we mix this around, you can see our temperature is in the ideal range, so we're good to go. Turn that off, and then the next thing we are going to do is mix in our nutrients. You always want to mix in your nutrients before pHing your water, because the nutrients themselves can actually affect the pH. So I will show you here. We have our nutrients in 3 different bottles. The brand I use is General Hydroponics in the Flora series. There's many different types of hydroponic nutrients out there. Each one will be different in the instructions you go by. This is just the one that I have been using, and there is an order in which you add these. You always want to add your Flora Micro first, and then you can add your Flora Grow and your Flora Bloom in whichever order you want after that. But always start with Flora Micro, and you also never want to mix them together and then add them to the water, because that can cause nutrient lockout. So always add them separately. And then as far as the ratios go, we have a little chart on the back of our bottle here, and you can see, depending on what stage of growth you are in, the ratios that you use will be different. So like I was showing you before in our seedling tray, we would use the ratios for cuttings and seedlings, which was 1/4 of a teaspoon per gallon of each of these. And so that is what I used on those. But on these, because they're just kind of starting out in their regular vegetative growth cycle, I am going to be using the general purpose mild vegetative ratios. And for that, that is 1 teaspoon per gallon. So since we have 15 gallons, that would be 15 teaspoons of each, which comes out to 2.5 ounces each. So I will be using this and adding them in. Alright, so I have my Flora Micro here, 2.5 ounces of it. Just gonna pour that in, give it a little swish, pour the rest in, and I want to mix that in really good before moving on. So I just have a yardstick I use for that. And then I'm just going to do the same with my Flora Grow and Flora Bloom, and I will be back when I'm finished with that. Okay, all of our nutrients have been added and mixed in very good with our yardstick. I would like to note that this water mixture should be replaced once a week. If the water level goes down very much, you can always add in more pre-mixed and pH water to top it off. My plants are young enough at this point that I haven't had really any problems with it going down, so I've just been changing the water out once a week. So the next thing we do is to pH our water, and depending on your water, you may need something alkaline or acid to bring the pH down or up. In my case, my pH is too alkaline, so I need to add acid to bring it down. On pH, right off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact range, but I try to keep my pH around 5.8 to 6. I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's from 5.5 to 6.5 is the ideal pH range. But in my case, I always have to bring my pH down. So I bought this General Hydroponics pH Down, which is basically made of phosphoric acid. You don't want to get this on your skin because it can cause burns in undiluted form, so just be very careful about that. You also want to add this in small amounts until you get the pH where you want. Don't add in a bunch at once, or else if you bring your pH down too much, you can't just add in pH up I guess that is bad for it. So you would have to add more water, not something to bring the pH back up, and that's just a pain in the butt. So it's better just to add a little bit at a time. And usually for my 15 gallons, I start out with 1.5 ounces at a time, and I have my meter over here. I'm going to turn it back on, and you just stick it down in the water and kind of swirl it around, wait for it to stabilize. Now, without the nutrients in it, my pH was around 7.4. As you can see, the pH already lowered to around 6.84, right around there. So you can see that the nutrients actually affected that, which is why you always do your nutrients first. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of my pH at a time. Okay, our water is pH'd. I just want to show you here. Now, putting this in here, I have it right at 5.75. And I did go ahead and confirm that yes, 5.5 to 6.5 is ideal pH for most hydroponics crops. And also I wanted to explain why we pH our water. It is important to get it in this range so that your plants can take up the nutrients better. I guess if it's out of that range, some of the nutrients get locked out. So that's why it's important. So we're gonna go ahead and prep our plants for going in. So I am putting our lid back on the tote. I went ahead and took the air line from our air stone and fished up through this hole. I'm just gonna go ahead and attach it to our fish tank bubbler down here. It has 2 ends, so I can attach 2 hoses. I have one going through my already started tank, so I'm gonna do that now. An additional note on lighting. I don't have any particular loyalties to any brand of light. However, for those that might be interested, this is a Mars Hydro brand light. I believe it is their TSW2000 light, which was recommended to me as a good light for beginners, but still is a very good quality light. I'm not sure that it really matters, you know, what brand or that you get, but I would suggest investing some money to get a good quality light and read reviews on them, because I did last year I tried growing with a grow light, and it was just a really small cheapo, and it was terrible, and my plants didn't like it at all. So I did have to invest a bit of money. The grow light would probably be the most expensive part of your setup then, but it's doing a really good job. So what we have here is, by the brand name, Hydroton, or they're also called expanded clay pellets, and they're exactly what they're called. They're just like a little ball of clay, and they're used to put in your little net pots here to surround your plant in the Rockwool to hold it in place. It's basically just something to keep the plant upright and in the proper position. But we do have to prep these. When they come straight out of the bag, they're pretty dusty with clay dust, and we really don't want that getting in our water and affecting things. So I usually just put the amount I think I'll need into a strainer, and I just rinse it underwater until I feel like the water's running clear, and I'll be back when I'm done with that. So I filled my little net pot up with clay pellets so that when I set my Rockwool cube in here, it roughly comes to the top of the net cup, and then I'm just going to go ahead and fill the sides in with clay pellets until it's full and holding this in place. And I'll be back. We have all of our new little baby plants in place in our system. So eventually the roots will grow out of the bottom of these nets down into the water to get their nutrients. Right now, the roots are not long enough to go down in that level. So what I do is I use an eyedropper until they do get long enough to reach. And I just kind of get some of this water from down in the tank, and every day I just make sure that Rockwool is good and soaked with that. And eventually the roots will grow out, and then they'll be able to get the water on their own. And then the next thing, I need to buy more, which is why I'm not going to show you on this side, but on this side you'll notice I have these little discs around the plants. All that is basically craft foam, glitter craft foam, and I just cut circles out and put them around the plants. And the reason I do that is because light can still leak down in between these pellets into the tank below and cause algae growth, and we don't want that. So that keeps the light out better, and also the shiny surface is kind of an added bonus as it bounces a little bit of light back up into the leaves. So that's pretty much all there is to it. If you have any suggestions, as I said, I am still very much a beginner, so there's probably still some things I haven't addressed. So if you have any tips or tricks that you'd like to share, feel free to add those in the comments. And I hope this helped for others that are just starting out and aren't sure what they need or what to do at first. So see you later. Happy growing.